like your Fujibond LC. Now, depending where you work, they might call it a different brand name, but they are what we call a GIC based liner. Okay, so Fujibond LC in 1:1 and 2:1 are both part of the GIC family. They're then related to Fuji 279, but they work slightly different. Okay, then you've got direct dentine bonding. So that's dentine bonding. So that's the etch prime, or like on the bottle it says primer. Then bond. Bond is also adhesive or unfilled resin. Those are all the same thing. There's 3 different names. Okay. Now, recently, direct dentine bonding has gotten really, really popular. I'd say within the last, probably coming up on a decade now, it's becoming really popular because there's a lot of research coming out that's, really good with its adhesion. You produce a hybrid layer, stuff you don't really need to know about, but it's really, they're saying it's whiz bang, fancy, fancy, fancy. When I was in second year, they didn't like us doing that. So it just shows you that, when you guys graduate, it is important that you keep your knowledge up to date because things will change, okay? Like, again, when I was in second year, we didn't do stainless steel crowns. Next year, you'll do stainless steel crowns. That's part of your curriculum. When I went through, it wasn't part of it, okay? Now, with Fujibond LC, that's been researched for a really long time. So using a GIC-based liner. So you've got 2 types. You've got the 1:1 and the 2:1. So based off of the exercise you did yesterday, 1:1 is 1 drop, 1 scoop of powder. 2:1, 2 drops, 1 scoop of powder. Now, how you use them and when you use them is slightly different, okay? Now, 1:1 is only referred to as just a liner. So it's only a liner. So after that, you need to etch the enamel. So that's usually around the margins. And then follow that up with adhesive, bond, unfilled resin, whatever you want to call it, after that. Okay, because the liner is only going to protect the dentine. All right? Does that make sense? Now, with 2:1, that is what we call a liner and an adhesive. Now, the easiest way to remember what is what, I used to remember as a student, was 2:1 is like shampoo and conditioner 2 in 1. It's stupid, but you remember it. So, it's a liner and an adhesive, okay? That one, just a liner. 1:1, one thing, liner, okay? So there is 2 steps in regards to doing this before you can put composite resin in. With 2:1 though, you put the 2:1 in the whole thing, like cover the enamel and the dentine, you're ready to go with your composite resin. Knowing that now though, so do you guys remember in yesterday's task, you had to learn GIC uses a chemical bond, composite resin uses a micromechanical bond, right? So they're both GICs, right? So when you place that, whether that be on the enamel or dentine, for either of it, they're bonding only chemically. Now, a chemical bond is good, all right, because you get that ion exchange, but it's not super strong. It's nowhere near as strong as a micromechanical bond because you've got an actual, those porosities sticking it together like a puzzle piece, okay? So if you were to compare bonding strength, 1:1 is better than 2:1. Does that make sense? Because you've got a micromechanical bond after when you etch the enamel and then put the adhesive on. This one, there is no micromechanical. It's just condition, 2:1, set it, composite resin goes in. So knowing that, it's also important, you look at the situation. You have to think about what tooth am I restoring? Where am I restoring? Is it occlusal, buccal, palatal, whatever? Is it under a lot of occlusal force? Things like that. So you have to, tailor make your decision based off of your clinical scenario. So as you go on, you get, patient scenarios. Those are the sort of things that, we'll ask you to sort of do before you select what material you're going to pick. Okay? Now, is that all clear, guys? So I'd say predominantly this is going to be your liner of choice. When you guys start seeing patients and when you ultimately do restorations, most people tend to do this. Even in private practice, in public practice, the majority of people use some form of GIC liner. Okay? Now, the next one is dentine bonding or direct dentine bonding, whichever one you want to refer to it, okay? Now, you're going to be etching the entire cavity. You're going to be placing the primer. Now the primer, you don't set it, you just pop it in. Now when you etch something, you have to dehydrate it, isn't it? Like when you do a Fisher seal, you dehydrate until it's really frosty, okay? The difference between dentine and enamel though, is that enamel is made of crystals, right? Dentine is made of essentially like, it's made of the similar, what's the word?
Collagen?
Collagen, thanks Kathy. Yeah, it's made of collagen. So it's, when you etch it, it doesn't demineralize. All right, it's like putting acid etch on your skin. It's just gonna burn it, okay? So when you etch the dentine and then dehydrate it, any sort of tubules that might have been opened when you etch it, all right? Because do you guys remember there's fluid in the tubules? When you dehydrate it, all that fluid is gone. So the primer acts as the replacement for the water in the tubules, all right? Then the instructions from the manufacturer say to use a little bit of air, really gently. That's designed to help disperse it. And then don't set it. You put your bond, adhesive, unfilled resin, whatever you want to call it. You put that on. Make sure you almost agitate it a little bit. So just sort of like mix it around so that you're really getting it into all the tubules.
So we use Scotch Bond here
Scotch
today.
Bond, yeah, Scotch Bond.
Scotch Bond is what we use,
Yeah.
and that's the unfilled resin.
Yes, that's right. So Scotch Bond is the brand name of adhesive, unfilled resin, bond. All right, bond, unfilled resin, and adhesive are just generic terms for unfilled resin, which is Scotch Bond. You can get different brands, different names. Okay, but ultimately, if you ask like the rep who's selling it, say, "Oh, what's that? Is that unfilled resin?" They'll be like, "Yeah." So then you know exactly what it is.